Hey guys, welcome back to a long-awaited part 2 of our interview with Sonic, Dr. Sonic. We apologise that it's been a few weeks since we've uploaded an episode. We've had a little bit going on, which we will update you in the episodes to come, but we look forward to seeing you back weekly on a Monday. Enjoy!
Is there a capacity for the gut to have processed foods without reacting badly?
Every person is going to be different. Mm-hmm. There are some people who have celiac and they'll never be able to eat gluten and things like that. So it's going to be different for everyone. But I do think that there is the capacity to be able to eat things that are bad for the digestion and be able to handle it. Like, in the end of the day, we want to do things right, but we also are here to have a human experience and to live. And sometimes ice cream is delicious. Sometimes a milkshake is delicious. Sometimes pizza is delicious. And I used all of those examples because they are not particularly good for the gut, but you still should be able to eat it sometimes. And ideally what you want to do is have a strong, robust digestive system that if once in a blue moon you go out and you have pizza and a milkshake and ice cream, that the next day your digestive system kind of says, listen, I didn't love that meal, but you look after me all the time, so I can handle it. But if people are eating the wrong things frequently, then the digestive system is going to become weak, and you put a meal like that in and it just won't be able to tolerate it. You need to think of your digestive system as a fire, and when you put the right wood on your fire continues to burn and it's strong and it's robust. Then if you go and put the wrong wood, pizza, milkshake, ice cream, it just burns through it. But a lot of people do not have strong, robust digestive fires, and I don't think many people eat well, and I know that that's a really big comment to make, but there is a philosophy of Chinese medicine dietetics which then talk about what is the right thing to eat.
And what is that? Let's go into that.
So let's keep it really simple. I think the first principle of Chinese medicine dietetics is hot cold. And you touched on this before, like what does hot cold mean? And it all comes from the first principle of Chinese medicine, the yin yang. The yin yang is this idea of mutual oppositional forces. I'm sure you're familiar with it. I'm sure all you listeners are familiar with it. We all know the yin yang logo picture. And it is this idea of mutual oppositional forces. And we can see an example of those oppositional forces, hot, cold. Yang is hot, yin is cold. And when we think of our body works hard to keep ourselves at 37 degrees. And when we think, what is digestion? I spoke about God before. Maybe we're connected to God. Maybe there is something above us or around us that we are connected to that is this infinite source of energy. And if you believe that, that's fantastic. But while we are living this human experience within our human bodies, we are not infinite energy. We might be connected to it, but we're not. And we get our energy from the food we eat and the air we breathe. So you have to put good fuel into your body if you want to have energy. And therefore, digestion is a process of getting energy. So when we think about it, it's a process that we also don't want to have to spend energy on. If we're trying to get energy, if you're eating a meal and that there's a potential in that meal to give you an arbitrary 100 points of energy, you don't want to spend 90 on it just to get the 100, because then you're only getting 10. So we come back to hot cold. Our body's working hard to keep ourselves at 37 degrees. If you were to make a smoothie in the morning, you put in your spinach and your kale and your banana and your frozen berries and your coconut water, and smoothies are really trendy because from a macronutrient perspective, the big building blocks, you've got all your things. But you make your smoothie and, your frozen berries and your ice and whatever, and then you blend it and it's like 3 degrees, and you've just put 3-degree liquid into your digestion, which I just said is a fire. We don't want to put freezing cold liquid into a digestive fire, because what happens then is our body needs to send all this energy into the digestive system to warm itself back up. And if we even go a little bit deeper, we can put all of this Chinese medicine stuff to the side. Let's think physics. Let's think kinetic energy. Heat makes things move faster. Cold makes things move slower. In the digestive system, digestion is a process of molecule bumping into enzyme and it breaking it down and us breaking it down to get energy. There are going to be a lot less collisions if the kinetic energy is slow. If all the particles are moving around really slowly, there's going to be less collisions and we're going to break down less. And that would be fine if everything stayed in the stomach until it was completely digested. But that's not how the body works. It stays there for the few hours that it stays there and then it moves on. So we want to eat things that are hot so that our body is not needing to use energy to warm itself back up, and they're going to increase collisions. The next principle that we want to focus on, and these are the two main things, is we want to eat things that are cooked. When you think about the evolution of humans, once upon a time we were not eating cooked food, and then we utilized fire, and fire and cooking is actually digestion as well. Like, you think about the mammoth that once upon a time humans ate, and it was like raw and tough, and then we started to cook it on the fire and it became, slow cooked mammoth. It would just fall off the bone. Well, it's because it's really easy to digest. And once again, we need to use less energy within the body to get the nutrients out of it. So if a raw mammoth steak was 100 points of energy, if we're eating it raw, maybe we only get 10. But if we eat it cooked, then maybe we get the 90.
Wow. I feel like that's such a part of nutrition that's lost on like the mainstream audience, especially on social media. It's definitely not talked about that eating hot food is so much more beneficial for a human being than having those cold smoothies. And I know I can feel like, oh, go me, I had a salad and my gut has just reacted almost worse or the same to not eating the best or healthiest food. And I always wondered, it must be my gut, like I'm the problem. And yeah, it's interesting to hear you talk about how cold really impacts our system. Now, just to be controversial, and
we love controversial.
I know your beliefs around cold exposure. I just wanted your Eastern medicine, Chinese medicine input on this fad at the moment. We've talked about it privately. We all have seen the ice bath thing, and I know it works wonders for some people's mental health and go wild, but tell us about the impact of cold exposure and ice baths from a Chinese medicine perspective.
Great. I want to preface this with, the world we live in now, for every one opinion that exists, there are going to be 10 different opinions that say something different. And I'm not here to tell people what they think is right or wrong. That's not what I'm here for. But I will tell you what I believe. And I think that there's a good way to kind of discern information, and it's to look at who's been doing it for a long time. If you want to know how to be vegetarian, look at the Indian culture, because there are people within the Indian culture that have been vegetarian for thousands of years. Same with this raw cold smoothie diet. Like, it's a real trend fad now, but who has been consistently having cold raw smoothies for breakfast for thousands of years? No one. So that's what I'm going to preface it. If you want to know if it works and it's not just a trendy fad, my way of discerning that is to see if people have been doing it for a long time. So if we put that lens on cold therapy, I don't know. I don't think many people have been just doing cold therapy for a long time. You look at the cold places where there was icy water, I don't think many people there in Iceland, places like that, Sweden, all of those really cold icy places were just jumping in the water for fun. Does it mean that it's bad? No, not necessarily. Ice baths can be beneficial if it's done right, if the right person is doing it at the right time. It's the beauty of this medicine is there's not one answer for everyone. We treat people, once again, and we always come back to that. And it sounds a bit broken record-ish, but that's just the truth. Like, what works for me might not work for you. What works for you doesn't work for all your listeners. Everyone gets treated differently. So are ice baths bad? Consistent cold exposure is not fantastic, but often what people are doing now is hot cold exposure. So a lot of the Scandinavian research suggests that a 20-minute sauna a couple of times a week is really beneficial for health. And then what people will do with that is go and do the ice baths. Now, assuming that this person is not bleeding, it's not their time of the month, if they're someone who bleeds, if you're someone who bleeds, do not ever do an ice bath while you bleed. That applies to everyone who bleeds. But if we're assuming that you are not someone who is actively bleeding, then if you're doing hot cold therapy, then maybe to finish off cold, so that you've been in the sauna, you've gone in the ice, you've been in the sauna, you go back in the ice, so that when you finish your hot cold exposure, you're not sweating. Maybe that's okay, because without going too much in the theory, you close off your pores, you stop yourself sweating, we're stopping to leak the fluids that our body actually wants. So then it can be okay. But if people aren't doing the hot cold therapy and they're just doing lots of cold exposure and just going into the beach for a swim, also like the beach isn't ice cold water. That there's a difference between cold and icy. Ice is just this sudden shock. It shocks the nervous system, where cold is also just cold. So if you're doing that, check in with yourself. See, like, how do your hands and feet feel? It's wintertime now. Do you have cold hands and feet? If you do, then your circulation isn't as good as you think it is. And then maybe doing cold exposure isn't the best for you. Do you have lower back pain? What's your digestion like? The cold gets into our body. And as I said before, it slows down the kinetic energy and it slows down physiology. If you've got really poor digestion, you don't want to go in the cold, because that cold will get into your organs and it will continue to affect digestion. And I'm just going to say it again, but if you're someone who bleeds, you are on some level open. It's a system of yourself that is open to be letting that blood out, and the cold will go right out that system that is normally closed, and it will just lead to fertility, to menstrual pain, to all sorts of things that you don't want to have to deal with. So, yeah.
Wow. There you go.
There you go.
You've heard it here. Do you mind if we talk a bit about, I had a guest on previously that had also done the Vipassana 10-day course. Mm-hmm. And I know you've done that, and I just want to preface this, like, Sonic is one of those people that you meet and you go, how are you so happy? Like, you're filled with joy and energy. And I totally agree when you talked earlier about that you were born to be a healer, because being around you is healing. Your energy is healing. Whenever I felt down, like in my worst moments in my journey recently, like when I forget my worth, you're someone that I've called to be reminded of my assets, and that really comes naturally to you, to see the good and to see the positivity. How did you get to that perspective consistently?
Well, firstly, thank you for those things. It's very kind things to say, and I'm always going to be here for you as well. But how did I get there? I think it really started this journey when I was mentally unwell. Like, I got to a really bad place. And before then, like, life had been fun. Life was joyous, and the experience of my life up to that point had been a really nice experience. I'm really lucky. I have an amazing family. I went to a good school. I had good friends. Like, everything in my life was great. But then why was I feeling like the way I was feeling? So I knew that there was things that I needed to uncover. And meditation was a tool that helped me uncover some of those things. And Vipassana was, definitely one of the ways of which I meditated that helped me uncover those things. And I just think that sitting with yourself, sitting in that discomfort and understanding the nature of the reality that we live in, it's a really undervalued. And I know that everyone talks about meditation, so it is increasing in its value, or at least its perceived value, but it's really just so important. Like, we are here to have this human experience, and that human experience can be all sorts of things. But one thing it can be is joyous, because all we have is now. And I'm not saying that everything in my life is always perfect and everything's sunshine and rainbows and unicorns. No, like, that would maybe be nice, but we need the yin yang. We need to acknowledge that it's the struggles in life that make us appreciate the goodness, and just understand that nothing lasts forever and we can't control everything, and bad things happen, and that's life. Life is the push and pull. And in the end, it's that push and pull between struggles and joy that push us forward as a species. Like, we move forward because things are struggling, and we adapt, and therefore we become stronger, and it pushes us as individuals and us as a species forward. But we don't have control of all of that. But what we have control over is, okay, well, all of this is happening. How do I want to feel right now? And I think when we adopt that attitude a little bit, this is bad thing has just happened, and this is bad thing, and this is bad thing. Okay, that sucks. And we will acknowledge that, and we'll sit with that. But how do I want to show up right now? It kind of helps us to see things a little bit differently.
You become intentional.
Yeah. And sometimes what you need to do is just cry. Like, if things are really bad, awesome, cry, get it out, let it out. But then maybe the next day what you need to do is, okay, things are tough. I'm sad, but I need to do some things that are really good for me. And some of those things are meditation. And meditation is hard. Like from someone who meditates, meditation is really hard. It's not meant to be easy. If it was easy, then everyone would do it and that would be great. It is hard. And for some people, it's even harder. I have ADHD. Sitting and just like being still with my thoughts, or still without my thoughts, it's hard. But you practice. And I think that is a really important word, because all of these things, yoga, meditation, all of it, it's a practice. It's not a perfect. You're not meant to be Buddha the first time you sit down, but you practice and you keep doing it. And I think when people are starting to meditate, it's like, okay, well, why don't you start doing it every day for a month? And after a month, then you can check in and see how you feel, because change doesn't happen overnight. So do it consistently. Just be like, I'm not even thinking about how I feel, I'm just doing it. And then in a month you might look back and be like, oh, whoa, actually, like I have noticed that I feel more calm. I have noticed that I'm able to have a better outlook on this. Because time heals, but we can't always just rely on the passiveness of time. We can also be more active in our journey.
And perfectionism paralysis is something that I deal with, where I think, if I can't do it perfectly, then I'm just not going to do it. I have this paralysis from starting the meditation or starting the practice of wellness in whatever capacity. And I think it's about trying and doing it badly.
Totally.
Yeah.
And Vipassana is all about non-attachment. And I think we need to go into meditation with non-attachment. Don't be attached to the idea that you're going to be good at it. Don't be attached to the idea that it's going to be a good meditation. Your brain might be like, okay, cool, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to have a really good meditation. What am I having for dinner? What am I doing tomorrow? A million thoughts. Okay, great. That's what your meditation is. You're going to sit there, you're going to be non-judgmental to yourself, and you're just going to be like, what am I having for dinner? Okay, well, right now I'm not going to think about that thought. And when you finish the meditation, who cares? That is meditating. It's not. I think people have this idea that meditation is just like sitting down and disappearing into some cool. If that's what your meditation looks like for you, fantastic. But if it's just you sitting there kind of playing a really gentle game, and this is how I sometimes envision it, a really gentle game of mental table tennis. It's like that, that old video game Pong. So you're sitting there and you've got your little racket and a thought comes in, you just want to really gently, lovingly, non-judgmentally hit it away. Cool. That is meditation. You don't need to be, doing crazy things.
And what that creates is an observation of the thought. If I'm witnessing this thought come in and I'm ponging it away or I'm hitting it away, I am separating from the thought, which is the whole purpose of meditation.
Well, that's where the magic happens, because if you're sitting down actively trying to just be you as you and mind, because if you're sitting down not doing that but thoughts are still coming, well, then there's a little bit of separation between that.
And that's the greatest place to live, because that gives us choice about not being victim to our conditioned belief systems or our fears or our judgments.
Yeah, and it enables us to step into a place where we get good at feeling these thoughts come in. So, I don't know, someone says something to you that you really don't like, and rather than just reacting with, and getting angry, you can kind of feel that anger happen and be like, you know what, I'm not going to attach to that. And you can respond rather than react. And then we enter a really different realm of communication and life, and everything just gets better and better.
And that's the greatest power.
For sure.
To witness that and not go into the cycle. And go into the pattern.
Yeah, and that's then where joy can come from, because if you're someone who is, no one, after someone says something that you don't like and you bite their head off, you don't walk away and be like, oh, that was great, I'm really happy I did that. But if after interactions that you have, you can walk away and be like, wow, I handled myself good in that interaction. Like, I was a version of myself in that interaction that I'm happy with. Well, then you have all these reasons to feel joyous.
And that's where our self-esteem grows.
Totally.
Love it.
Yeah, it's good. So have Chinese medicine and meditate.
What I wanted to ask you is, how does all that impact how you treat people in Chinese medicine? Does your spiritual meditation practices and that sort of interest impact, and do you treat people and suggest those types of things in your appointments? Does it impact the appointments in any way?
It does. It impacts in a couple of ways. One, in terms of suggestions, I think that I've seen benefits of lifestyle changes that positively impact my life. So I will then suggest those types of things to my patients. And sometimes if it's someone who's never meditated before, I don't say, oh, well, go and do a Vipassana. It might be like, all right, well, what I want you to do is just sit down with your eyes closed and just breathe and count to 100. Great. Like, it can be really simple. It can be download Insight Timer and do these guided meditations. Like, you don't need to start off thinking that you're the expert. None of us are the experts at anything when we start. So yeah, it can be really simple things. And then for me as well, just being able to be more present in my day-to-day life means that when I'm talking to a patient, I can really be present with them. It's sometimes the things that patients tell me heavy. Sometimes it can be triggering. And what I need to do is not get triggered, not get caught up in the heaviness, and just be there holding the space for the patient, because what I'm doing with them, it's their experience, it's their time. It's not for me to get triggered. It's not for me to be like, well, this is so hard and emotional. Like this, no, like, yeah, it is hard and emotional, but I need to just be robust in myself so that I can hold the space for them so that they can get the most out of the session.
I love it. Can you tell me more about, I mean, you touched on it earlier about gua sha, and I know you do moxa. And cupping. We've talked about acupuncture. How do these other guys over here work?
And again, broken record, but we are treating people, not symptoms. So when someone comes in, I don't know exactly what the treatment's going to look like. I generally know what the person is coming in for, because before I treat someone, I have an intake form that goes out and you fill it in, and I know what you're coming in for. But then how am I going to treat you? It depends. So then we have, of course, acupuncture. And just quickly, just for anyone who hasn't had acupuncture before, I want it to be known that it doesn't hurt. You know, people are scared about it. Oh, you're putting in a needle, and their only experience with needles are the needles that they get injections with. You could probably fit 20 to 30 acupuncture needles inside the hypodermic needles that you use. Like, an acupuncture is the width of a hair. It's so different. It's not something that hurts. So yeah, we have acupuncture, and then we have the ancillary techniques. So cupping, moxa, gua sha, and depending on what we're doing with the person, we can use those things. So cupping, I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with. They're glass cups that we use to suction on a muscle. And then what we're doing there is creating space between the muscle and the fascia. Everything is always, we're going to be talking about flow. So we're just creating that space between the muscle and the fascia so that more chi and more blood can circulate through there. We can use cupping to help with musculoskeletal pain. And we can also use cupping to help pull, that suction can help pull things out from the body. So if someone has done too much cold exposure and they've got coldness in them, and that coldness can be causing weak digestion, that coldness can be causing contracted muscles that are then causing muscular pain, we can pull that cold out. And it's actually a really cool thing to do with patients, because I talk about hot and cold this, cold that, and it kind of sounds a bit like, what are you talking about, cold? But then when you do the cupping, you can put your hand when I've taken the cup off, and you can feel cold. Like, you'll feel next to the cup and you'll feel body temperature, and then you put your hand on the cupping mark and it will be really cold. And I'm like, yeah, so that's the cold that I've been talking about that your body has been storing.
Wow.
Which is really cool. And then gua sha is, like a scraping and scrubbing technique. And it's used to help break up any little blockages in particular areas. So I love doing gua sha for people that have a stiff neck. You come in and we kind of use like a ceramic soup spoon, and we scrape. Scrubbing is probably a nicer word, but over the area. And it just really helps to block up the blockages. They say in Chinese, and I'm not going to say it in Chinese because my pronunciation would be really bad, but when there is smooth flow, there's no pain. And when there's pain, there's no smooth flow. So what we're aiming to do is just have, once again, smooth flow in that area so that we don't feel pain. So we use gua sha as a way to break up any little blockages to improve the circulation so that we can have a restoration of that flow to get the alleviation of pain. And then moxa is a form of herb. It's the herb mugwort, or in Latin Artemisia vulgaris, that has been compressed into either, it kind of looks like a cigar, or I also use little stickers that have the moxa on it, and you light that herb on fire and it burns like incense, and it puts warmth back into the body. So we're going to use moxa when a patient is cold. We're going to use moxa when we need to strengthen the yang energy, the warming part, and we're going to use it when we need to increase circulation once again, because heat increases the kinetic energy, we're going to get more flow. So there are all sorts of different side things that can happen within the treatment space.
Beautiful. I love it.
it's fun. It means that I'm never just doing the same thing with anyone. Like what happens in the session is always dynamic. A person might say a single word. I'm like, oh, cool, we need to use Moxa. And then, of course, I feel the people's pulses. And then I get most of my information about what's going on from the pulse. And the way that I practice my medicine is I feel your pulse, and you feel the pulse on each wrist. There are 3 positions that we feel it in. So we're doing like chest cavity, abdominal cavity, pelvic cavity. Each position there are 3 depths. And then there are, if I'm not mistaken, 24 qualities that we can feel for. So there's a lot of information in the pulse. And then the pulse really points me in the direction of the herbs that that patient needs to take.
Beautiful.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
It's amazing. And I feel if any of you guys have listened to today and thought, I want to give that a go, or I want to just go out on a whim and try something, either whether it's maintaining your health or you do have an acute issue that you want to deal with, Sonic has been amazing and has discussed he wants to give our listeners a discount. So if they mention the pod,
yeah, just mention the podcast. Say, I listened to the podcast and you told me that I can get 20% off, and I will honor that.
yeah.
And it can be as demanding as that. You can say, you said. I'm like, okay, yeah, cool. You get that.
Amazing. So I will pop his booking link in the show notes below. But that is all we have time for today. And I just am so grateful for you coming on, and you taught me so much in that sitting.
Well, it's really exciting to be here. I actually had put on my manifestation board a couple of months ago that I really want to be on a podcast. So this is a big, like, exciting moment for me too.
Ah, well, I'm glad it was mine.
Yeah, me too.
Amazing. Well, yeah. So guys, please go check out Sonic's pages. I'll pop his Instagram, his TikTok, his website, and yeah, go visit him whenever, or tell your friends about this episode if it's something that you think someone should listen to, if you know someone going through something. I had a friend that had this chronic headache and neck pain, and she saw osteo, chiro, doctors, everything, and we were actually in a bathroom one day, and this woman said to her, because she was crying, poor darling, when we were at a dinner, and this lady said, you know, you should try like a Chinese medicine doctor. And I was like, I have the person for you. And she's headache free. And she had headaches for months on end last year. And yeah, I try not to mention it with her because I don't want to like jinx it. But yeah, she's been headache free this whole year.
Yeah, we did some pretty cool stuff. I guess if we're finishing up, just know that if you get to a place where you're struggling with something and you feel like you've exhausted all efforts, come and see me, because you haven't. And even if you're not seeing me, even if you're in somewhere else or you want to see someone else, that's fine. But just please, the one takeaway, let's actually say 2 takeaways: eat warm cooked food and acknowledge that Chinese medicine, there's so much potential to help you in your health journey, and it kind of lets it become that. It gets to become a health journey where you get to reclaim some sovereignty over your own health. And we haven't touched on it too much in this episode. I guess I'll have to come back.
Yes.
But I think that that's a really important thing to have in our society, is sovereignty over your own health, and embarking on a journey where you play an active role in your health journey rather than just sitting back and being told, do this, take this, do that. It shifts everything so quickly and so differently.
And you're empowering people to have that control and to have that choice.
I'm trying to get them to a place where they're like, hey, Sonic, thank you so much for what we've done. I don't need to see you anymore. If I can get people to do that, I'll come to you for maintenance, then I know I've done my job well. Because if you're coming to me every week for the next 10 years, I don't know if I'm doing my job well.
Yeah.
But if I can get you to a point where you're like, hey, I don't really need to come, awesome, fantastic.
That's really reassuring. I read this book once, and this woman had cancer, and she went and saw her Eastern medicine doctor and then also Western medicine doctor, and similar advice that don't stop anything that you're doing with the Western, but we can also do what we can over here. And,
for sure.
And she got to a position where she was completely in remission.
For sure. Yeah, and I hear stories like that, and that's amazing. We also have to acknowledge that just because it worked for one person, it doesn't mean that that is exactly going to work for someone else. So I echo that advice. If you are dealing with something and you're seeing your Western practitioner, continue doing that. I'm not here to tell you that not to do that, but we are so lucky to live in a world where we have access to both. And for me, it's foundational in my doctrine of medicine. It's the yin yang. We don't need to pick yin or yang. You don't need to pick Western medicine or Chinese medicine. Have both. They're both here.
Insert that ad.
Yeah,
Why can't
exactly.
we have both?
¿Por qué no las dos?
Thanks, guys. We will see you next week.